All right. Everything looks good over here. We will get started in just a moment. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to stream number 11 of The Gift of Guthix. Let me make sure my audio is doing fine. Should have probably done this before I went live. Let's see. Okay. That looks good. Okay, yeah. We can work with this. All right. So, when we last left off, both the Asgarnian alliances and the Fremmenik clans were beginning to grow weary of the war. People began questioning Gunnar's motivations, and King Radalian, unable to fulfill his promises to his allies, began to have some concerns about the stability of his kingdom. And we are doing a little bit of a time jump. We last left off the 54th year of King Radalian's rule, I believe, and now it is the 61st year. So we will continue from there. So, Chapter 18. The 61st year of the reign of King Radalian of Asgarnia, the first day of the month of Rintara, Falador. And that is where we are, Falador. Master Unaya frowned at the staff laid out on Ilmi's work table. It's not very royalty-looking, she said finally. Shouldn't you fix that before you lock down the design? I haven't locked anything down, Ilmi said, as she swabbed salve over the burns, splotching her thumb and the girdle of her hand. I'm still calibrating it, though. It's more temperamental than the air one. Of course, Unaya said. She looked around Ilmi's makeshift workshop. They had much better tools, much better resources in the Wizard's Tower, but Ilmi saved herself days of travel by staying in Falador between deployments. The room was cramped with her belongings, as well as borrowed tools and books and bowls of carefully separated runes. Rue had tucked himself into a helmet hung upside down from a nail in the wall, and eyed Unaya with the same sort of trepidation that she eyed the room. "Does your master think this is the best use of your time?" "Aziris?" Ilmi said. "Aziris wants to know what I need to make 100 of these." Master Endel's funeral had been too quick, too brief, the necessity of war. They shrouded him in green and buried him in the grave ring around the Druid's Grove, with a guard of knights. Aziris, Irithona, Ilmi, and the other Green Order wizards held a sort of vigil in turns, along with Xanamaron, who held Aziris's hand through the part, through her part, and only spoke softly to her. Faris and Glenn and Master Terramin. "He was a good man," Terramin said, "a proud seeker of knowledge. He never sat in his ignorance, which is the greatest thing I can say of a person." Grief and anger still swept up on Ilmi months later. Master Indel had, in some ways, been the cause of the Fremmenik invasion, but he had been a man of vision, a man who wanted better for the world. They would be building on his beginnings for a long time yet. And he would always be the man who had chosen to save a ring of frightened young apprentices at the expense of his own life. "I still question if Aziris was the right choice to succeed Master Indel," Master Unaya began, "especially since Xanamaron." "Master Indel was very clear about his wishes," Ilmi said, tying the bandage off. "I need to reseat these crystals. Do you have something specific you need help with?" Unaya pursed her mouth. "I've been speaking with Faris, and he's expressed an interest in working under you on these elemental staves. Naturally, I wondered if you'd done anything to encourage him." Ilmi frowned. "Encourage him?" "He belongs to the Blue Order," Unaya began. "Can the Blue Order not work on elemental staves?" Ilmi heard the arch tone in her voice, and tried to temper it. "I'm not trying to steal your apprentice, Master Unaya. I don't particularly want an apprentice." Unaya blinked at her. "Why ever not?" Ilmi considered the staff, her mind full of all the people this war had taken from her, all the people it could still take. Indel, Sterkalis, Zoria, Gunnar. "I think it's best we all keep ourselves flexible for deployment," Ilmi said quietly. I couldn't teach an apprentice reliably and be available to the king." "I suppose," Unaya said, "though I imagine, for apprentices' sake, your help is not in high demand at the moment." "Rude," Rue grumbled, almost too soft to make out. The attack at the Mind Altar had only been the beginning of Asgarnia's internal struggles. While Ilmi led the expedition back to Falador, the White Knights were in Karamja trying to secure the Nature Altar and drive the Fremmenik back to their longships. Meanwhile, Gunnar's army appeared outside Varrock, where the Earth Altar was located. King Radalian had taken forces to Misthalin, honoring their treaty, and spent 7 days pushing back the Great Jarl's horde. For a moment, it seemed possible they could crush the Fremmenik on both fronts. It was dangerous, but with the growing whispers that the Great Jarl's ability to run Asgarnia in circles meant the kingdom was weak. Its vision flawed, its king already beyond his strength. Kentra, White Knights, wizards. All sides had agreed they needed to seize the opportunity and end this now. The Narvra returned. A riot broke out in Falador beneath the banner of the disbanded Caravissus tribe, spurred by discontented nobles. Port Sarum in the south declared itself independent under the protection of the Massamam. Suddenly, received suddenly revived after their long ago defeat by Radalian. Excuse me for a moment. What insurrections do under ancient banners are dead names? Ilmi said slowly, has nothing to do with me. Except it did. Gunnar's fingerprints were on all of these. Worse, the enrestment Asgarnia could only focus on its own borders. When the Fremmenik attacked Caridia, when the Fremmenik attacked Caridia, destroying their mage arena and the fire altar beside Kintra, Caridia. I'm unfamiliar with that name. When the Fremmenik attacked Caridia, destroying their mage arena and the fire altar besides, Caridia's call for aid went unanswered. Radalian could not divide his forces any further. Menephos, the site of the soul altar, the source of precious runes, went silent, refusing Asgarnia's contacts. No one could make the trek to re-establish the nature altar. Mistlin filled with the same rumblings that pre-staged rebellions against that pre-staged the rebellions in Asgarnia. The Narvra will fall again, Unaya reassured her, mistaking Ilmi's mood. We will prevail, and you've done so much. She paused. I wonder if the Green Order still suits you. If I recall correctly, you joined largely because Master Indel is the one who made overtures. I'm Guthixian, Ilmi said. Unaya shrugged. Things change. I think you'd be quite the asset to the Blue Order, and a credit to Saradomin's teachings. Besides, your god, after all, doesn't want worship. Ilmi grit her teeth, knowing it was futile to argue with Master Unaya. She made herself count to 10, untwisting the wires that held the red crystal in place. Choosing her words carefully, Rue grunted in his helmet, bad friend. Ilmi shot him a disapproving look. Manners! Here you are. Valsen stood in the doorway, her cheeks flushed, her blue eyes dancing. She nodded at Unaya. Ah, Master Unaya. How are you? Do you mind if I steal Ilmi for a moment? Unaya stiffened. Hi, Marshal. We were just finishing, Ilmi said. Rue leapt from his nest to perch on her shoulder. Thank you for your concern, Master Unaya. I'll keep it in mind. She stepped around Unaya and followed Valzen out into the hall. What's happened? Another attack? Where? Downstairs, Valzen said, striding away from the little room. Ilmi had commandeered. Not an attack. I have something interesting you need to see. Ilmi frowned, following her. What is it? Did you recover the naphtha barrels, or some sort of summoning pouch? Better, Valzen said. We have a spy, and she's asking for you. Ilmi frowned. One of the Narvra? One of the Fremmenik, Valzen said. As she turned down a staircase, Tyra Gunnar's daughter. Ilmi knew not to expect the fawn-legged girl with the prominent chin she remembered from the summer before she'd been sent off to marry. But when she saw the gaunt woman with the mud-stained clothes, for a moment Ilmi was certain Valsen had been tricked. But then Thyra looked up at her, those same berry-bright eyes, Fiera's chin, Gunnar's nose, sharp and a little long. Then Thyra said hesitantly, On to Ilmi? A pair of knights, one black, one white, stood guard in the cold little room, the smell of old straw and damp crawling on the air. It was cramped and cruel, and Ilmi imagined what stories Thyra must have heard of the Asgarnian monsters, how much this place must have fed into those stories, and Ilmi, standing there, ageless, unscarred. All over again, Ilmi wished she could wind back the years. If she'd only told the truth, if she'd only helped Gunnar leave, but she caught herself. She could not pretend she was the only one whose choices mattered. She could not hold the whole war on her shoulders. Is it her? Velzen asked, one hand perched on the pommel of her sword. Yes. Thyra, Ilmi said, moving to sit beside the other woman. What are you doing here? Thyra regarded her solemnly, hands folded in her lap, in the lap of her tattered skirt. I've been exiled, she said. I need safety. And you came to Falador? Ilmi asked incredulously. Thyra, we're at war. I'm well aware, Thyra said. Where do you think I've been all this time? Which returns us to the question, Velzen said. Why are you here? Thyra drew herself up. My father is going too far. I wanted him to stop. I was going to Relica, to the law speaker, and the other Jarls, but they caught me. I was exiled, she swallowed. He has my children. I want my children back. That's what I want from you. Safety and my children. Ilmi shook her head. I don't know. What do you have that can pay for these things? Velzen interrupted. Your father's not exactly circumspect about his goals. We know what he's doing. Yes, Thyra agreed, but his plans are changeable, fickle at times. Velzen eyed her. And you know something worth how many children's lives? 3, she said, and yes. Velzen sighed when Thyra didn't continue. I see we're at an impasse. Very well. You can remain here in this room, safe from your father, regardless of what you tell me. If you give me valuable information, I will see your quarters improved, and we will discuss how to rescue your children. Fair? Thyra looked at Ilmi, sitting beside her. Can she promise this? Ilmi thought of how best to explain Velzen to Thyra. She's like the king's sister. He will listen to her. Thyra said nothing for several moments. At last she turned to Ilmi. Why did you do it? Ilmi sighed. My master began the lie thinking Jarl Viljar. No! Why did you kill Zoria? What? Ilmi startled. You loved him, Thyra said. I know you did. My father thinks you lied about this too, but it never made sense to me. You love the Guardian. Even if you deceived my father, I don't understand why you'd kill Zoria. I may not have many opinions, but before I go any further, I want the answer to this. Why? I didn't, Ilmi said, too flustered for careful words. Gunnar told you I killed Zoria? He killed Zoria. Thyra blinked at her a moment. No, she said, he wouldn't. He did, Ilmi caught herself. Tried again. I think he meant to kill me. He summoned a monster, and Zoria got in between us. I tried to help, she paused. I didn't hurt him. I was trying to hit the demon, but the spell caught Zoria. I didn't mean to, but I wasn't as careful as I should have been. She shut her eyes. Maybe your father didn't mean to either, but his axe in Zoria's skull and his demon that he summoned. Thyra tilted her head, frowning. My father isn't a summoner. Your father is a madman with an army seeking to eradicate rune magic, Velzen said. Are you going to help us or help him? Thyra studied her another long moment, as if asking without words whether she could trust Ilmi too. But there was no way around it. She was exiled, alone, trapped in this tiny dark room. She folded her hands and looked down at her knuckles. He's angry you've figured out how to rebuild rune altars. He's destroyed. His goals were always to finish that, then destroy this city and take the rune essence back. But since you keep rebuilding them, he intends to strike Falador instead. That is his next goal. Velzen snorted. Let him try. He has allies you don't know about, Thyra said. Small enemies he's made great. He'll break your city open and destroy the rune essence. That was always his plan. Ilmi frowned. The rune essence? And so we should shelter you here in the city you expect your father to destroy, Velzen said. Pardon me if your payment is a little short. If It's information you didn't have, Thyra demanded. But Ilmi's thoughts were racing. Her memories of the mine and the silky garments, the silky grains of rune essence running through her fingers. People think, she told Gunnar, like she were sharing a secret, that we have so much essence in the tower where the vault is, but they can't imagine what the mine holds. And Gunnar scoffing, you should just build your city on the mine. Then you don't have to go away every autumn. The tower's not in the city, she told him, which means it's much easier to move. To a mountain up north, at least. Thyra, give us a moment. Ilmi grabbed Volson's arm and pulled her outside the cell. We don't keep rune essence in Falador, she whispered. Volson frowned at her. No, we don't. Why does that matter? If Gunnar plans to attack the city and steal the rune essence, Ilmi said, then those are two separate attacks. Does he know that? He does, Ilmi said. I told him about the tower, about the vault. Thyra doesn't. Clearly, she thinks it's just part of harming Falador, but he said he's going to destroy the rune essence. Maybe he forgot where we kept it. No, Ilmi said. All this time, he hasn't forgotten. He hasn't forgotten a word. He knows how to get to every altar. He knows all the obstacles, all the places we've struggled because I was the idiot who told him. He didn't forget where the rune essence vault is. The attack on Falador is a feint. Destroying the jewel of Asgarnia is a feint. Would you pay the slightest attention to the wizard's tower if you knew he was attacking Falador? Ilmi demanded. Of course not. If he's attacking Falador, that's where all our resources need to be. He knows that. She hesitated. And I know him. He won't leave the rune essence behind. The rune essence is the point. Volson frowned, considering. We don't know where he's going to attack. No, Ilmi agreed. But we know what he's looking for. We know what makes him angry. You want to convince the great Jarl to attack Falador? Volson said, a slow, most devious smile curving her mouth. I want to convince the great Jarl to walk into the wizard's tower, Ilmi said, where I can deal with him myself. That's the end of chapter 18. Give me a moment here. Just gonna have a little bit of coffee. We are getting a little bit closer to the answer about what happened in the cave that where Zoria died. We still don't know how or why we still don't know how or why the demon was summoned. So that's something. But let's continue on. Excuse me. 19. The 32nd year of the reign of King Radalian of Asgarnia, the 38th year of the month of Pentember, in sight of Falador. Falador shone in the early morning light like a jewel of flame on the dark velvet of the hillside. Its guard tower as high as the oaks, the Fremmenik felled to build their longships. Its staggered walls and palisades like cliffs overlooking the vast sea of Asgarnia's fields. The seat of Radalian's power, the birthplace of the new age, the font of rune magic. At a distance it seemed so solid, as if it had always stood, it would always stand. How could such a marvel be anything less than permanent? But nothing in the world is permanent, and even the greatest fortresses rot away in time. Falador, the jewel of Asgarnia, faced an army darkening the horizon like a blotch of mold. Gunnar rode out on a bay gelding. Gunnar rode out on a bay gelding, heavy with armor and ready to end this. Years and years of striving, and now his goals were in reach. When this was finished, he could rest. Falador would crack like an egg, shattered on the might of the Fremmenik and their gathered, imperfect allies. All the non-combatants, his settlers, and the herd tenders, had been sent north to Ice Mountain to prepare a new outpost for the army once Falador had fallen. He closed his eyes and savored this moment. Already he could picture it, the summoned beasts and the siege engines tearing down the curtain walls, the disciplined white knights unprepared for the sheer volume of the Fremmenik horde. His people knew by now how to break a city. That Falador was larger, sturdier, made no difference. The Asgarnians would find too many of their wizards and black knights had been sent away, too focused on rebuilding the rune altars. Gunnar had waited for this, biding his time, biting back his temper. Let them think they're winning. Gates coming up, Jesper said beside him, and Gunnar opened his eyes. The wizard's tower stretched like a flame before him, bright with the dawn. Gunnar adjusted his stolen white knight's helmet so he could count the windows, assess how many stories it rose. He checked his satchel. He carried over one shoulder, and the sword in its scabbard. Everything was coming together just fine. War lay in the city's bones. The conflict of the warlords writing scars across its infant self. There were still too many who remember the bold attack of the Narvra in the early days, the Caravis, the Massima, in the stained glass windows, the stories of Radalian, a hero on the battlefield, withered in flames of magic and followed by knights of every creed, shone bright and cheerful when they were when they depicted what they depicted was violence. What they depicted was defense, kingdom, and nation. As the army of the Fremmenik horde flowed over the fields, banners of fallen tribes, towering monsters, siege weapons of far-off enemies, archers lined the walls, reminded of kingdom and nation. Wizards stood ready, runes clicking in their hands. The white knights prepared behind the gates, armor bright, swords ready. Their grand master, calm and certain. Their king mounted like a warlord again, sword and fire staff in hand. A howl, like the restless dead, skirtled over the fields, Fremmenik war horns, chilling the marrow of every Asgarnian. No one made a fuss of the squalid squadron of white knights who rode into the wizard tower. If there was one thing Gunnar knew by now about Asgarnians, it was this. They were too convinced of their own mastery, too sure they couldn't be used or tricked, certainly not by mere barbarians. There were 4 of them, Gunnar, Fornia, Jesper, and a young wolf warrior called Bragi, who entered the tower. The others encircled the building, waiting for the right time to strike. Soon, he thought, feeling the simmer in his nerves. It will be over soon. The tower inside was bright with white stone, strangely airy for a building made of rock. He didn't know where the vault of rune essence would be, except it wasn't below him. He found stairs on the opposite side of the vast entry hall, and made towards them, all confidence, all sureness. But when he made his way up the first half flight, a knight in black armor appeared to block his path, and then another. Gunnar Viljarson, I presume, a voice said behind him. He looked back and saw a woman in the same black armor, her dark hair cut short like a shining cap, her eyes blue as a summer sky. Stanifin Valzen, Radalian's Zamorakian hound. Gunnar drew his sword. You do presume Zamorakian, he said. Do you want to die today? Your daughter let us know you'd be visiting, she said, unfazed by the threat. We've been waiting. Grief and fury stabbed through his throat. Grief and fury stabbed through Gunnar's heart. Where's Thyra? Safe. You'll forgive me for not taking your word for it. You'll forgive me for not taking the word of an Asgarnian. You'll forgive me for assuming you didn't ask in good faith. The woman shot back. You can come with us, or make it difficult. Gunnar turned fully to face her. Below him, Fronya, Jesper, and Bragi stood ready to fight. They could hold off the Black Knights in the entryway. There weren't all that many. He didn't need them to hold off all that long, which left the two ahead of him and whatever lays upstairs. Through the doorway, he gauged the light of the rising sun, the lengthening of its rays. Asgardians, he thought, always too convinced of their own mastery, always certain they could not be bested by mere barbarians. I think, he said, I will be difficult. Just before the barrels of explosives outside shattered every window, the whole tower shook. Fire devoured the roofs of Falador as arrows rained down on the shields of the armies below. On the wall, the song of bowstrings snapping, runes crackling into magic, the grunt of the dying, all made a symphony of war. Fire turned the Fremmenik lines. The white knights in strict formation split a trebuchet from its tenders like wolves lambing a deer. Like wolves laming a deer. It burned like a beacon as its twin smashed another hole in the curtain wall and the Fremmenik poured through. Gunnar had the pleasure of seeing Sanafin Valzen startle. The Black Knights, unprepared for the sudden explosion, all leapt, turning, expecting more trouble. Gunnar did not wait to see if they regained their focus. He turned back up the stairs, met the two knights in 3 quick strides. The first he merely seized by the arm and wrenched down the stairs in a clatter of armor. The second, recovering, drew her sword, but Gunnar came in fast, smashing his own blade into the side of her head, bouncing the helmet off the stone. He hurled past, aiming for swiftness, for confusion. The explosion set off chaos in the tower. Wizards in robes of red and blue and green and gray hurled back and forth, demanded he tell them what was happening. Gunnar ignored them, eyeing the rooms as he passed. One had to be the vault. Up another staircase, he heard shouting down below, the Black Knights recovering, and he hoped his warriors would earn the trust he'd placed in them. People streamed past. It didn't matter. He only needed the vault. He only needed to end this. What he had imagined, Gunnar couldn't say. It was a small room, so much smaller than the mines. As Yomi said, long and narrow, the floor shining patterns of black and yellow stone that peeked out from beneath boxes and heaps of glittering runes essence. He let out a breath, half sigh, half laugh. This was it. He'd found it. Even if he failed everything else, even if they rebuilt 100 altars, he would succeed here, and no one could say he had let rune magic survive. He hauled the door open, dropped the bar across it. He hauled the door shut, dropped the bar across it. Gunnar, a voice said, stop. To fully capture the battle for Falador and song or stained glass would be an act of greatest fiction, each moment too sharp, too jagged to fit neatly together. The smell of burning roofs, the echo of screaming horses, a young wizard collapsing on the battlements, an arrow speared through her jaw. The king, a comet carving through his enemies with fire and sword, howling wolves and smashing bears, shimmering with spirit energy, knocking aside soldiers. The White Knights fighting mightily to block the breach in the city walls. The banner of the Narvra collapsing into the seethe of its army. To capture the battle in song or stained glass would mean admitting that neither the Jewel of Asgarnia and the great horde of Fremmenik was winning. War is ugly, and kingdom has its costs. For half a lifetime he'd imagined seeing Ilmi again, prepared for what he would say, what he would do, and so the alien flush of the light that hid him startled him. She was his friend, on some unshakable level. His soul was so sure it was a good thing to see her again. I don't know what you're doing, she said so calmly. I know what you're doing, she said so calmly. I won't let you take it. This is your enemy, he told himself, his nerves abuzz breath with sureness. She killed Zoria. He wondered how he looked to her, if she recognized him, or if she'd thought him a stranger. He hadn't used rune magic to prevent the flow of time. You misunderstand, he told her. I don't want to take the rune essence. That stopped her, puzzled her. Why are you here, then? From the bag he carried, he drew out the flasks, 2 glass bottles of lurid liquid taken from the Kandarian alchemists. Together they burned hot enough to crack stone, and a third solution, the barrels of naphtha that had destroyed the tower's windows, would look like popping logs in a fire. Gunnar's back clinked, heavy with bottles. I'm here to destroy it, he explained, to make certain the essence is mingled irrevocably with the ashes of your tower. Her frown deepened. That would kill you, too. Fate was like a warship. Its oarsmen tireless, but all sailings had their limits. Gunnar tilted the bottles, held between his fingers, so the liquid clung in sheets to its curved sides. That's the plan, Gunnar said. That was always the plan. Give me a moment here. Okay. The 62nd year of the reign of King Radalian of Asgarnia, the 4th day of the month of February, the Wizard's Tower. Ilmi stared at the bottles in Gunnar's hand, frozen. That wasn't in their plans. They had prepared for a formal assault on the tower. They hadn't prepared for him to infiltrate. She had been prepared for the possibility she might have to kill him, but their plans had rested on the assumption that Gunnar was trying to steal back the rune essence, that he expected to remain alive. All he had to do was smash those bottles. If she killed him, there was a good chance they'd smash anyway. You can't do this, she started. I am the great Jarl now, he said. I do what I want. All through the war, she fought with herself, struggled to remember this was bigger than her mistakes, graver than her sacrifices alone could solve. It was about her fight with her friend. It wasn't about her fight with a friend. But here and now, it was only her and Gunnar, and a feeling of grief welling up in her chest. Why would you kill Why would you kill yourself? She asked. Is it because of Zoria? Don't talk to me about Zoria, he snarled. Don't you dare. You lied. You flouted his bargain, desecrated his gifts. He gave them freely. He didn't know you were making weapons of them. Yes, he did. Ilmi stormed forward, but Gunnar held the bottles high, ready to smash them, and she stopped. Gunnar, I didn't lie about what spells were made. I showed you both. Oh, yes, you did, he said. You killed him with them. And your axe? Gunnar flinched. He was already dead. Your demon made sure of that. Ilmi flushed, furious, all her grief boiling away, just as Thyra had said. He wasn't pretending she'd done it. How many times have you told that lie? You know you're the one who called the demon. You know it went wrong. Just admit you were trying to kill me, and accept Zoria died because of it. Why are you still lying? Gunnar demanded. I was there. You summoned the demon. I don't know how to summon things, Ilmi said. I never learned. Your dragon. Rue found me. I didn't call him. She hesitated. Everyone saw you worship demons, and your brother was a summoner. I'm not my brother, and I can't believe you still think we worship demons. There had been only 4 of them in the mine: Gunnar, Ilmi, Zoria, and Rue. Zoria had not brought the demon forth. Rue couldn't have. Ilmi knew she hadn't done it. Gunnar persisted in saying it wasn't him. If it wasn't you, Ilmi said, and it wasn't me. Someone else was in that mine. Someone else killed Zoria. Someone else started this. Gunnar stared at her a long moment, as if she were the one holding explosive flasks in one hand, and, in his expression, Ilmi saw her own heart mirrored. Someone else had broken them. Someone else had made their friendship unfixable. There must have been someone in the Wolf clan who was angry. She sped on, trying to call faces names. Not your father. He would have just killed Zoria. Maybe... No, Gunnar interrupted. No, you aren't tricking me again. I'm serious, Ilmi said. If they're still out there, they might be manipulating you. The only person manipulating me is you, Ilmi. He shook his head. For a moment I almost believed you. After all this time, all this work, every gift of Guthix, sacrifice I've made, I still nearly believed you when you said it was all for nothing. He threw the bottles in his hand against the floor, their oily contents splashing over the tiles, igniting where they mixed into white-hot flames. When people spoke of the Fremmenik, they spoke of their relentlessness, their tenacity. If they retreated, you did not celebrate. You feared the fiercer attack, pre-staged. 1 warrior fell, 2 more took his place. A summoned creature shattered. A greater one appeared. People spoke of the powers of the White Knights, the unity of Asgarnian, but the Fremmenik were endless, and in the presence of an unending pressure, all things fell apart. Flames leapt from the floor, as eagerly as if they'd caught on dry grass. Gunnar drew another flask from his satchel, and Ilmi didn't think, only swept her staff towards him, aiming the spear of air at the flask in his hand. The tunnel of wind snapped his arm back, throwing the flask behind him to smash against the wall. The room was thick with flames and heat. Ilmi pulled runes from her pouch, water to complement the air, crushed them together, and loosed a bolt of icy water over the flames. The water didn't quench the fire. The conflagration spread over the mound of rune essence behind, carried on the water like oil on vinegar. Ilmi cursed, coughing as the vapors scalded her throat. Gunnar yanked another flask free of his satchel and pulled back an arm to throw it into the spreading flames. The earth runes nearly slipped through her fingers as she seized them, collapsed them with her hand, still half in the pouch. A wave of soil cut between the flames and Gunnar as he hurled the flask, blocking and smothering the fire. "Gunnar, stop!" she shouted. "I don't want to kill you." Someone banged on the barricaded door, too far to reach, too solid to easily destroy. Gunnar smashed 2 more flasks, flames bursting into life between them, and met her eyes over the fire. People describe the Fremmenik as endless, but anything that pushes for an end will find its limits. A warrior sent to war for 20 years will tire. A child grown in conflict will want conflict's end. The White Knights swept their lines like ghosts. Their trebuchets fell one by one until the last, only able to aim at the inner walls, was left flinging the carcasses of horses. But they hadn't been told to stay. They had been told to stay, to hold, to fight. In the north, on the slopes of Ice Mountain, their families gathered, prepared to start again. Another outpost, another home, another attempt to gain a foothold. If this was Guthix's will, who were they to argue? They argued anyway in quiet voices over fires in the forest depths by the rivers where they washed. On the Ice Mountain slope, there was a cavern, a perfect place to settle the Fremmenik, to wait and see if at last the great Jarl's vision was complete. A hall beyond any they could build, a hall already inhabited, Camdozel. the home of the Incamdo dwarves. The Incamdo saw the Fremmenik approaching, knew the stories of their tenacity, their endlessness. The Incamdo, who made their own storied weapons, told their own tales of hall and creator, of safety and defense. This cavern was not for the Fremmenik, but in their fear, the Incamdo made certain it was for no one. Another wave of earth, another fire smothered. Gunnar leapt back out of the way of her spell, reaching for more flasks. How foolish could he be? He'd already told her. He'd planned to die here. He planned to reclaim his honor by any means necessary, each to the extent of his own abilities for the price of his own sacrifices. Another time, it would have made her sad, but all a rage boiled in Ilmi instead. You idiot, she shouted at Gunnar, fumes burning her throat, her eyes, her nose. Someone else started this. If it's about Zoria, then killing both of us isn't going to change anything. Destroying the rune essence and you will change plenty, Gunnar retorted, pulling out another flask. I don't want to kill you, Ilmi shouted. Gunnar, I don't. But if you don't stop, I will have no choice. There are people in this tower. She broke off, coughing. Something shattered at her feet. A flask. The third flask. The catalyst first this time. The noxious liquid splashed up her hem, staining her green robes black. If she met Gunnar's eyes and saw only hurt, she met Gunnar's eyes and saw only hurt there. In each hand was their destruction, the components that made the oily flames. She didn't want to kill Gunnar. Panic swallowed Ilmi. She grabbed her runes, all instinct, the stones bubbling, blurging between her fingers. Gunnar threw the flask, and she crushed together the errant stones, slipping from her grasp. Her mouth tasted metallic, sparks biting her tongue as the air staff's magic swept through her. A wave of water flowed out from her, a torrent like a waterfall crashing sideways. White foam coiled at her spell's terminus, where it crashed into the flasks, shattering the glass. The fluids mixed, the flames erupted. And as before, the water carried the fire so hot it could crack stones along like a ship sailing over the waves, before crashing over great Jarl Gunnar Viljarson and engulfing him in flames. The battle stretched, an inward breath, a rising tension, no quarter given, no retreat called, the city nearly broken, the White Knights holding its inner walls, the Fremmeniks exhausted, their resources dwindling as quickly as the Asgarnians. Ilmi realized she was screaming. What she took for Gunnar's howls of pain was the tearing of her own throat. He was strangely silent, mouth agape, his shape only shadows between the searing bright flames as he stumbled, an uncertain body. Ilmi drew runes, hands shaking, though thoughts reeling. Earth smothered the fire. That's what she needed. But at the same time, some animal urge told her to go grab him, pull him away. You are covered in that oil, she thought numbly. He can't touch the explosive oil. We'll all die if he touches you. She drew together the earth spell, too big, too much. She just wanted to stop the burning. It swept over him, bearing him away from the stain on the wall where the first flask had shattered, and smashing him to the door. Some flames vanished under the wave of magically generated soil, and so did Gunnar. Ilmi ran to him, wary of more fire, but as the spell faded, the earth dissolved into magic. She saw she'd managed. All the fire was out. But Gunnar Viljarson lay dead, his features ravaged by the fire, his chest crushed by the earth, his vision incomplete, his destruction still enough to damage the world. His dearest friend, once, feeling as though she had done everything wrong. Oh, Gunnar, she managed, a lump rising in her throat. The banging on the door had grown rhythmic. The strike of a weight trying to smash through. The bar bent. The hinges snapped. The door fell, letting in a handful of Kintra. Valzen pushed past them, eyes wide, sword out. She took in Gunnar's corpse, the mess of the vault. What did he do? She asked. What did he tell you? Ilmi shook her head. He meant to destroy it. He meant to die. Her voice broke. The tears she'd swallowed down for too long spilled over. He was going to kill me, she said between sobs. He was going to kill everyone. I tried. Valzen knelt down beside her, a firm hand on Ilmi's arm. You succeeded. Not what I meant to do, Valzen sighed. You're too hard on yourself. And to Ilmi's surprise, the other women hugged her, her armor pressing painfully into Ilmi's shoulder. Come on, Valzen said, quietly. Come away. You did your best. It's all over. Now we have places to be. A shadow crested the hills behind Falador, a darkness that had no place in the high sun of midday. It formed a block, a wall, and, on rattling hooves, bore down on Falador, pinned down and nearly broke. On the wall, for a moment, the young archer watching caught his breath. Another army, another enemy, but the shadow did not falter, and soon enough he saw the banner of the Kintra, called away at the worst of times, arriving when needed most, too much to the despair of the Fremmenik. And that is where I'm going to leave it for today. Very intense. I like the way it sort of simultaneously describes the battle at Falador and the battle at the Wizard's Tower. It's very interesting. Yeah, I like that. But we will continue on next time. We're getting closer to the end of the book. We only have about 100 pages left. So, we're not going to finish it off next time. That would be like a 5-hour stream. But I think a couple more streams of this and we'll be done with the book. And then I'm going to make a video on it. And I think that would be really interesting. So we'll see. Yeah. Thanks everyone who stopped by. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.